to dwell.
So let's see. Okay, we should be good now. This is the largest union talk radio program in the South, the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. You can leave us a voicemail at any time. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. You can also leave us a written note at tvlr.fm/contact at any time. Speaking of that, we got a really cool note yesterday, and somebody mentioned it in the chat about the 2022 to 2024 Postal Service grievance payout report on the Office of the Inspector General's website. I read a little bit of it yesterday, and it is really, really interesting. The top line number is that over those 2 years, nearly $1 billion with a B were paid out in grievances to postal employees because of management violations of the contract. And there was one employee who got over $300,000 in grievance payout, not in his salary, in his grievance payouts. So over that time period. So
talk about dues money at work, right?
I know, that's crazy. And so I sent a note to the APWU because I want to talk to somebody about this. And if you're listening to us, if you're a postal employee and you've got thoughts about this, you can leave us a voicemail. Again, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. Leave us a written note, tvlr.fm/contact, or you can call in starting at 11 a.m. Central Time. We'll be taking calls. We got a bunch of stuff to get to in the first half of the program. But if you are a postal employee and you have thoughts about it, I would love to hear that. My reaction is that seems like there is widespread management disrespect of the contract, and my concern is, particularly under this administration, that instead of focusing on management respecting the contract so that grievances are not filed in the first place, they will try to tamp down on grievance payouts, proper grievance payouts, instead of focusing on like proper enforcement of the contract. So, anybody has any thoughts on that, let me know. I have reached out to the Postal Workers Union, and I'm trying to get a guest on to talk about it because that's like crazy. $1 billion in grievance payouts over 2 years seems like a lot. And the person who mentioned it in the chat was not even the person that sent it to us. So that's, it seems like that report is going around in the postal worker circles. Interesting. We got some people talking about UPS in the chat because our main guest during this program is going to be a UPS Teamster, David Allen of the Roswell Hub, Teamsters Local 728. Going to be talking to him about surviving hunting season after peak season at UPS. That interview is going to be at 10:15 a.m. Central Time. And we got a bunch of other stuff for you. In the second half of the program, we are going to be talking to the president of the Minnesota AFL-CIO about what's been going on in Minneapolis, how labor is responding, including calls from labor federations in Minnesota for a general strike, and like real deal stuff potentially happening there. So great show. I'm really excited for the show today. First, though, we want to get to some Alabama news. Last week, Governor Kay Ivey gave Alabama's State of the State address ahead of the legislative session. This is going to be Kay Ivey's final State of the State address because she is not running for re-election. And they are.
She's termed out, right?
She's termed out. Yep. And so. And also, she's old. I don't know that she would run again, even if she. I mean, I don't know. Old
Either
people,
way, it's her last one.
yeah.
It's
Either
her
way,
last one.
old
Her last
people
one.
do be running for office, but either way, it is her last one. And they're aiming for this legislative session to be short because you got the elections coming up. And so, Adam, you watched. I think both of us watched the State of the State address. What were your big takeaways from her State of the State? Like, what are her priorities going into this session?
Well, like you said, the legislators are definitely aiming for this to be a short season. The party primaries start May 19th. That's coming up really soon. And they can't campaign if they're in session. So a lot of rumors that they're going to be aiming to get out as early as possible. So, keep your eyes peeled for that. That's something to note. They may be moving at breakneck speed. So especially if there's something bad passing through, you want to keep your eye on that. And maybe a tough road for some positive bills as well because of that. But, in terms of Governor Ivey, some of the things that I heard from her in her State of the State about her priorities, she is a big fan of the CHOOSE Act. And, we've talked about that bill quite a bit on the show. The CHOOSE Act is a private school voucher program. It also applies to homeschooling, and so it is a form of a tax subsidy. And she wants to increase the funding fairly significantly, given some funding constraints this year. So she does want to increase the CHOOSE Act funding. She wants to really promote the CHOOSE Act. She was pumping it up that it's going to grow bigger and better in the future. A couple other things I heard. She does support the cause to expand the death penalty to apply to more folks for more crimes. So I'll mention that in a moment. But and also there are modest raises proposed for state and education employees. 2% is what I'm hearing. So we'll see, how it shakes out. The governor's proposal for budgets is never like the final product, but it's a good foundation to know kind of where people's heads are at. So 2% pay raises for state and education employees is what I'm hearing. And, that does kind of lead me into the state budgets and the taxes and what we're dealing with there, because a lot of you may know that there are two budgets in Alabama, right? The general fund budget and the education trust fund budget. And really, constitutionally, the lawmakers in Montgomery only have two jobs, which is to pass those two budgets. What we're seeing so far is basically flat budgets. The Education Trust Fund, the ETF, has a little bit more money than last year, which would be going to those pay raises, as well as increased health insurance costs. PHIP, the Public Education health plan for employees there, it is requesting over $300 million extra this year for increased cost. So that's something to keep your eye on. In the past, a lot of times when teachers get a pay raise, often the health insurance goes up at the same time, right, and eats into that pay raise. So something to keep your eye on there. The general fund actually has a slight cut. And so it's going to be difficult to get like new appropriations this year. So I know there's a lot of folks who are interested in, expanding support for housing. We have a housing trust fund and, public transportation trust fund. They don't have any money in them. A lot of folks would like to see that, but it's going to be tough. It looks like this year. And, last thing I'll mention on the tax front is there's going to be debates on further tax cuts, including grocery tax, including reinstating the overtime tax cut that was very popular with a lot of people. Also was very costly, according to the folks in Montgomery. So a couple of things to keep your eye on there when it comes to the budgets and taxes. But And
I want to mention a couple more things on the taxes and budgets. The Ivey's proposal would increase the Education Trust Fund by about $560 million. It would be a 5.8% increase, and most of that would go towards the modest teacher pay raises and towards health insurance costs. But PHIP and whatever the insurance programs for the state employees generally and for the teachers specifically, they both needed a significant influx to be able to avoid raising premiums on teachers and state employees. Specifically, they asked for the Public Employees Health Insurance Plan, PHIP, requested $380 million to avoid cost increases in the coming year, and Ivy's budget proposes a $210 million increase. So that's only a little bit, and like you said, I mean, that's going to, if nothing changes, then that is going to require some increase in the premiums or some other, increase in healthcare costs for state employees that will cut into the meager 2% raise, does not keep up with the cost of inflation, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of that $500 million is going to go towards increased funding for the CHOOSE Act, as you said, just pumping money into private schools that have little to no accountability, that can turn students away if they want, that most of which people were already, like, the CHOOSE Act is not driving an exodus out of public schools. There's some people that are doing that, but primarily the people that are getting the advantage of this are folks that were already in private schools and who, one way or another, were able to pay for it. And the more that the CHOOSE Act expands, the more and more regressive it is going to become, and the more and more you are going to get fly-by-night bad actors in the private school space. I mean, there's been a lot of stories. You should really look at the private school voucher schools in the state of Florida to take a look at how easily systems that are as loose as Alabama's have been taken advantage of by bad actors who are not giving good education, whose students come out the end of it worse prepared. Like, the idea is that theoretically you're supposed to get a better education at private schools. But the reality is, and we've talked to education experts about this, the reality is that the good private schools are already full, and they're not interested in significantly increasing their roles. And so the people that actually fill the gap are these fly-by-night actors that actually make things worse for the people that leave public schools for these private schools. So spend a little bit more time on that than I wanted to, but those were some things that I wanted to mention. Health and hunger were another couple of big things.
Yeah, well, I'll hit just a couple topics really quickly and mention that on that budget front, the SNAP program, food stamps, it's going to cost an extra $40 million this year to administer the program, thanks to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And that's going to go up over $170 million extra next year. So the full price will be paid next year, it seems like. And that's something else, is that there's a lot of conversations around the fact that, this year it's not looking great budget-wise, but next year is when a lot of things are coming home. And it's going to be really interesting to see what plays out there. And the last thing I'll mention on that is that Senator Arthur Orr, he seems to have a bee in his bonnet about SNAP and Medicaid. He's got several bills out there going after recipients and, adding regulations and hurdles. He's got one called SB 61, which is basically going to complicate things for both SNAP and Medicaid. And bottom line, the folks I talked to think it's going to just kick people off the rolls while making it a lot more bureaucratic. And he's also gone viral for trying to regulate what can be bought with SNAP benefits, right? Sodas, candy, things like that. He's hoping to ban those from SNAP, which is interesting because, like, for the last couple of years, a lot of us have been pushing a bill that would take tax incentives away from companies that violate child labor laws. And it hasn't passed yet. And it's fascinating when you have lawmakers who seem more concerned about the fact that, a poor person might get a box of chocolates than they are mega corporations receiving hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases, and can't even follow our own basic laws. Really a shame. So wanted to put that on your radar. We'll keep you posted on the legislative session, though.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention that, listening to the State of the State address, there was, incredibly noticeable for its absence was anything about healthcare at all. Basically, she did mention there are some subsidies for rural hospitals, like $200 million or
Supposed
something.
to, plug the holes in the Medicaid cuts,
The Medicaid and the ACA cuts, but
Right.
those cuts are estimated to be the equivalent of $10 billion a year taken out of the Alabama economy. And so $200 million does not fill that hole. That does not help the what is it? Is it like almost half? It's not. It's like 300,000 people in the state of Alabama that are on the marketplace. The nearly 100% of them that are going to see their healthcare premiums double
Right.
in
What's
the
that
next
going to
year.
do to the economy? What's that going to do to our workforce participation rate? What's it going to do to our jobs, right? The amount of jobs that we're looking at potentially losing, the amount of folks who are going to be spending more of their hard-earned money on healthcare and not in other parts of our economy. There's a real ripple effect from that.
Mm-hmm. And then the final thing that I wanted to mention on this that I saw, and I don't think I see it in your notes here, but I did see it, and I wanted to mention it. It wasn't mentioned in the State of the State address, but State Representative Marilyn Lands introduced a bill that would allow citizens to put ballot measures on the ballot themselves rather than the legislature being the only people that can put things on the ballot. I think whatever your political opinions are, you should want the citizens to be able to bypass the legislature, because obviously, we know that the legislature sometimes doesn't do things that the citizens would like to see done. And so we should have a way to say, to heck with the politics, to heck with the politicians, let us vote up or down on a lottery. Let us vote up or down on raising the minimum wage. Let us vote up or down on whether or not we want tax incentives to go to corporations that exploit children, right? I mean, we should be able to, when we see the legislature dilly-dally on priorities of Alabamians, we should have a workaround, and State Representative Marilyn Lands is putting that on the table for people during this legislative session. So that's something that I'm going to be trying to watch closely. I don't think it's going to pass this legislative session because the legislature wants to be able to be that stop on the aspirations of working people in this state. But, it's a piece of legislation that we should keep an eye on and that we should pressure the legislature to adopt, because any attempt to stifle this legislation literally is just saying we don't trust the citizens of Alabama. And I think people should be made to say that with their chest. We've got our guest on the line, Jay Malone. Jay Malone comes out of Texas. He is the founder of the Katie Jewett Organizer Apprenticeship and a member of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, IUPAT Local 2030 Movement Workers United. Jay, welcome back to the program.
Good to be here. Good to see you.
It's great to have you back. I think we talked a little bit about this last time we had you on, but can you remind people what got you involved in the labor movement?
Yeah, my path was definitely through experiencing exploitation directly in my work. I was working campaigns across the country, electoral campaigns, and misclassification is rampant in those kind of campaigns. And I didn't realize how bad it was until I got my first tax bill, which is a common way that you experience it. You don't realize maybe that you should have been holding back 30% of your wages, and then suddenly you've got a $10,000 tax bill. And I think that, in that experience, one of the things that really kind of radicalized me was the disconnect between a lot of the rhetoric in Democratic politics around, showing up for workers, advocating for workers, and then seeing how people are treated on the campaigns. And so it's been a major focus of mine ever since to figure out how can we build collective power in order to address these problems and make sure that actions are matching rhetoric.
And I'm not sure if you saw, but a couple of weeks ago, we did have President Aguilar on the program talking about the Texas labor movement. And, I mean, every time I see something from the Texas AFL-CIO, I'm just like, wow, they are so cool. They're doing so much really cool stuff. And a lot of stuff is happening in Houston. I mean, you've had strikes of hotel workers by Unite Here. You've had, the MC3 program in Houston in particular. My understanding is that it's really taking off there. Can you talk to us a little bit more locally? We talked to Aguilar about Texas generally, but a little more locally to Houston. What is happening there, and how are unions coming together and working people coming together to engage politically and build power?
Houston, unfortunately, we're coming from one of the lowest union densities of any city in America right now. But we've been able to figure out how to work together to do some really big, exciting things. The Unite Here strike was a big deal, not only because it happened, but also because the community showed up for them and because they won. They ended up getting really, really substantial raises, and that led to additional progress at our convention center and picking up steam in other areas. We also saw the first House of Blues was recently organized by IATSE, our IATSE Local 51. After many, many years of trials and tribulations, they were able to get that one win, and it's always exciting when the first is in Houston. We're seeing Starbucks organizing that's happening right now, and I was really excited to see a decision from the NLRB yesterday that should open up space for some of those elections to move forward. And then, one of the things that has been particularly exciting for me is seeing our building trades coming together. Harris County, home of Houston, allocated almost $14 million to expanding union apprenticeships. We were able to build, the Plumbers Local was able to build a med gas facility, first in Texas, to provide opportunities for members to work in hospital facilities. We're able to build new facilities for the electrical workers, the elevator constructors that have really expanded their facilities and their offerings. And we were able to connect that with work opportunities. Harris Health, our local public health system, created or established an apprenticeship utilization requirement for its recent bond, which is creating thousands of union jobs right now, ensuring that those apprentices that are coming out of those expanded facilities are getting jobs, good paying jobs in these public hospital construction projects. And we're starting to see some momentum building up, starting to see more rank and file organizing happening. And I think that's the thing that we're really trying to focus on in our local and through the apprenticeship, through our organizer apprenticeship, is building the awareness not only in our local elected officials, but also in our activist class of why labor matters. Labor should be the bedrock of everything. If we don't have power in our work, then we don't really have power anywhere in our lives. And that should apply to, every political calculation, every decision that everybody's making as they're engaging in activist spaces and anywhere.
Yeah, talk to us a little bit more about the organizer apprenticeship program that you're a part of. Now, this is different from like the building trades apprenticeship, right? It's not, for one thing, I don't think it's as long. For another, it's an organizer apprenticeship, right? The trade that you are being organized in for a shorter period of time is how to be an organizer with, obviously, as you said, like a labor sort of foundation and core. What is the kind of, who are your goal applicants? Like, who are the people that you want to see and that presumably you are seeing apply to be in this apprenticeship program? And what are the sort of things that y'all are trying to teach the people that come out of this program?
Yeah, the kind of foundation of the organizer apprenticeship is the experience that almost all of us have had, where somebody at some point gave us a leg up. And if it weren't for that, then we probably wouldn't have gotten on the journey that we are on. And the challenge is for most of us, particularly folks that come from working class backgrounds, it can be really challenging to find those people who, can create that space where you're able to expand your skills and, get into, organizing work. There are plenty of examples of these kind of programs that exist in different unions and in community organizing, organizing and training type of programs. But what we're really trying to do is take the full, apprenticeship mentality that includes, a mentorship system, classroom education, practical education, step increases in wages as you advance, all of those components that make apprenticeships so effective in the building and construction trades and other industries. We're trying to adopt it to organizing to create pipelines for talented working class folks into our work. And also to kind of integrate that philosophy that not only do we owe it to ourselves to invest in the next generation, but we are all better off if we have that mentality. In Texas, we've had kind of a collapse in organizing capacity across all movement spaces over the last few decades. And the way that we build that is taking that responsibility that this problem is not going to be fixed unless we invest really intentionally over a long period of time. So the apprenticeship starts with 4 months. It's classroom education, 72 hours a week. They're learning all of the organizing essentials, including how to have one-on-ones effectively, how to form committees, how to map and chart, applying that to not only to do a lot of different types of organizing contexts. During that time, they work for our local county party. So we, as the training fund, we raise the money for their salaries so that they're getting paid this whole time while they're learning and growing. And then at the end of the 4 months, we set up agreements to place them in jobs with allied organizations. Because ultimately, training is kind of worthless in the macro scale if you're not placing people. And also, we want to kind of foster that mentality that we have a responsibility to each other. So if you're going to invest in somebody, then you shouldn't just say I'm going to give you a leg up. You should say I'm going to make sure that if you show up every day and work hard, you're going to succeed. We're going to do everything to make that possible. And that's kind of how we believe we can rebuild a movement that can actually win.
That's really, really exciting stuff, Jay, and I'm looking forward to seeing the fruits of that, the fruits of those of that program. You also mentioned that you're doing work, and I'm not sure if it's through this apprenticeship program or through the Labor Council or some other entity, but you've been doing some work in Houston around educating candidates on how to be pro-labor. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this was something that has been a major focus of our local council for a lot of years. And it's kind of like shifting the orientation of the COPE process. A lot of times in the COPE process, there's kind of a gotcha element to the questioning and to the process, and recognizing that we are better off if candidates know the answers to the questions that we're asking them. And so one of the things that we developed was what we called a candidate academy. This was offered for candidates running at the local level, state level, and the federal level, because there are different questions, different pieces of information that you need about policy priorities at those different levels. And then we laid out, a multi-hour, sometimes as many as 2-3 hour program where we had different locals present. And we had really good attendance consistently because the candidates don't really have clear ways to find the answers to these questions. We have about 2% union density in Houston, and we've had low union density for a long time. So most people just don't have the kind of lived experience of either being in a union or of having interacted with union members who educate them. And so we're trying to make sure that we're being intentional about that. And one thing that our local party does is every candidate who files, so our filing deadline in Texas was back in December, everybody who filed got a packet that laid out, all of the essentials that you need to know about unions, including unions on your campaign. So information on misclassification.
Right.
And then also the contact information for different unions that will be directly connected to your campaign. So, make sure you're hiring stagehands for your events and make sure that you're hiring union printers, all those kind of things.
Jay, really appreciate your time. Sorry I put you up against the wall there. We're going to have to take a break, but we've been talking to Jay Malone, founder of the Katie Jewett Organizer Apprenticeship Program. We'll take a break, and we will be right back.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger food drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit nalc.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract. If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Today on the program, we just wrapped up a conversation with Jay Malone about the Katie Jewell Organizer Apprenticeship Program over in Houston, Texas. We talked about the Alabama legislative session, and soon we will be talking to a UPS Teamster about surviving hunting season. We'll also be talking in the second half of the program to the president of the Minnesota AFL-CIO about protests in Minneapolis and labor's response. All that and more on today's show. If you would like to leave us a voicemail, you can do that at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We'll open the phone lines at 11 a.m. Central Time to take your calls. You can also leave us a written note at any time at tvlr.fm/contact. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, tvlr.fm. But we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or just make a one-time donation, you can go to patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report or tvlr.fm/donate. We've got a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store, and finally, if you're a member of a union, you should get your local district council or international to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that.
Hey y'all, let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We want to welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, WMSP, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. And we are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. As most of you know, we are not media professionals, just a few diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class here in the American South. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we cannot do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in. Whether you're a loyal fan or first-time listener, we appreciate you spending some time with us.
Absolutely. Let's get to last week in Southern labor. Here's what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to from January 9th to the 16th. In new union campaigns, 261 workers across 7 bargaining units have gone public with their union campaigns. 25 workers in one bargaining unit are trying to decertify their union. 15 workers at Innovative Demolition Services in Lexington, Kentucky, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE Local 181. 7 workers at Concrete Quarrying Company in Lexington, Kentucky, also filed a petition to hold a union election with IUOE Local 181. Workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify IUOE Local 627 as the union representing 25 workers at Coors Lab Structures in Tulsa, Oklahoma. 140 workers at Weyerhaeuser in Heaters, West Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW, and 79 workers at Temco Logistics in Lithuania, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters Local 528. In election results, 190 workers across 5 bargaining units withdrew their petition for a union election. 531 workers across 8 bargaining units have unionized, and 40 workers across 2 bargaining units voted against unionization. Some of those units, 100 workers at Amentum Services in Jacksonville, Florida, voted by a 2-to-1 margin in favor of unionization with the IAMAW. 8 security guards at Martinez and Company in Gibsonton, Florida, voted 2-to-3 against unionization with the SPFPA, the Security Police and Fire Professionals of America. 312 workers at Zoom Services in St. Louis, Missouri, voted 136-7 270 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 610. 20 workers at Starbucks in Little Rock, Arkansas voted 15-5 in favor of unionization with Starbucks Workers United. 4 workers at Amentum Services in Fort Eustis, Virginia voted 2-0 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 822. And 23 workers at the Comanche Electric Cooperative Association in Comanche, Texas voted 13-5 in favor of unionization with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW Local 220. 10 workers at Science Applications International Corporation in Fort Worth, Texas voted 9-0 in favor of unionization with the IAMAW, and 117 workers at Albertsons in Sherman, Texas withdrew their petition to hold a union election with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, Locals 1000 and 540. In strikes and bargaining updates, workers at the DCCC, unionized with the Communication Workers of America, CWA, voted unanimously to ratify a new 3-year union contract that includes higher wages, 100% employer-provided health insurance, increasing commuter benefits, and more. 1,000 nurses at 3 hospitals in South Florida that are all owned by the Health Systems of America, HSA, unionized with National Nurses United, NNU, voted in favor of ratifying a new 3-year union contract that contains 12.25% raises over the contract term, improved protections for nurses who speak out about safety issues, enhanced protection that will reduce unsafe staffing levels, and more. Nurses at another Florida hospital, also unionized with NNU, will be holding a rally next week calling on the hospital to negotiate a fair contract. That hospital in Fort Walton, the Fort Walton Destin Hospital, owned by the Hospital Corporation of America. In a press release, the nurses said staffing and addressing workplace violence will be their top priorities as they start negotiations. Negotiations between the National Association of Letter Carriers, NALC, and the U.S. Postal Service are officially scheduled to begin on February 25th. As the union moves into its final phase of preparation, it convened 30 letter carriers from across the country, many of them rank-and-file members of the union, to review potential proposals and provide their input. In political and legislative updates, Elon Musk's Grok AI, which sometimes calls itself Mecha Hitler, has been, I kid you not, removing the clothing from children and posting their pictures, along with similarly lewd pictures of adults, who similarly did not ask the AI Hitler to create a naked picture of them. The AFL-CIO, the nation's largest labor federation, pointed out how legitimately concerning it is that Trump's Defense Department is integrating this AI into its military systems. Liz Schuler, the AFL-CIO president, said the Trump administration should not be funneling working people's tax dollars into the pockets of tech billionaires, especially in exchange for dangerous, untested AI. The AFL-CIO is fighting to ensure the federal government uses AI responsibly to minimize the threat these systems pose while protecting human oversight that can prevent catastrophe. Workers beat RFK Jr. last week. 9 months ago, the health secretary attempted to fire 1,000 federal workers from the National Institutes of Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH. Those workers are scientists, engineers, and technical experts critical to the nation's workplace safety and public health infrastructure, many of them working in Morgantown, West Virginia, and Atlanta, Georgia. Thanks to the union, the workers were placed on administrative leave instead of being immediately fired. More than 300 workers were pretty quickly brought back to work, and last week the entire staff was fully reinstated without a lapse in pay. National Nurses United, the nation's largest nurses union, celebrated the win and noted how reliant they are in their profession on the research that NIOSH does. The American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE, which represents NIOSH workers, said they will keep fighting to ensure the agency has the resources it needs to do its job well. This guy is determined to make you believe every stereotype that you have about Alabamians is true. The Alabama Public Library Service, chaired by John Wall, who is also chair of the Alabama Republican Party, said that the organization will continue to withhold funds from a South Alabama library until it removes 10 more books from its teenage section, including, I kid you not, Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. Trump thinks it's fine for bosses to steal from workers and allow them to be killed on the job. That's the only conclusion that you can draw from a new report by Good Jobs First about worker protection enforcement under Trump's second term. They found that prior to this term, such enforcement actions did not fluctuate very much, usually only about 4%. However, during Trump's first 9 months in office, enforcement dropped significantly compared to inflation-adjusted monthly averages from 2009 to 2024. A couple of highlights: wage and hour penalties have dropped 83%. Wage and hour enforcement cases have declined by 97%. Workplace health and safety penalties have dropped by 47%, and health and safety enforcement cases have declined by 35%. This comes after significant losses in staffing to the agencies tasked with enforcing these laws during the Doge debacle. It's also worth reminding people that even as laws protecting workers go unenforced, immigration enforcement funding has increased tenfold, resulting in masked men on the street harassing our communities. If we missed anything, let us know. You can send us your union updates at tvlr.fm/contact. And if you would like to get the exhaustive version of Last Week in Southern Labor, you can subscribe to the newsletter at tvlr.fm. We've got our next guest on the line now. David Allen is a member of the Teamsters, Local 728. He's not speaking on behalf of his union. He is speaking on behalf of his YouTube channel, the Roswell Hub, where he talks about practical advice for UPS Teamsters facing the attacks from management all the time. And we wanted to talk to him about what I have recently learned is sometimes called hunting season. David, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. Thanks for taking the time.
Hey, appreciate it.
Really excited to have you on. And UPS is now just coming out of peak season. I think that's a term that I was familiar with before I learned about hunting season. And I think most people can kind of intuitively guess what peak season is. It's, there's a lot of packages going around during the holidays, a lot of gifts being bought, gifts being delivered. And so business at UPS, the Postal Service, FedEx, Amazon, all of these places increases significantly during the holidays. Can you talk about, just on a day-to-day basis, what is it like working for the company during normal peak seasons and how it's been different this year, if at all?
Normally, we do work a lot of hours during peak season generally. And it just depends on what the company wants to do. I mean, if they really want to stretch their goals and make as much money as possible, they'll generally try to run with as much of a skeleton crew as they can get away with. But it's not like they don't hire people. They always do. But sometimes they hire more some years than others. This year in particular, they went really, really on the cheaper end, I would say. But this has been one of the weirdest years I've ever seen, because luckily I've been able to talk to a lot of people across the nation, and some of them are getting slammed and, there's no end in sight. Like, I was working generally 60 plus hours a week, but then I was talking to some people over in California and up north, and some of them were barely getting 8 hours. Wow. And it's just kind of a very weird time right now at UPS.
What do you think accounts for the uniqueness of last year's peak season?
I would say it has to do with just this whole networking change they're making right now. We're not alone. FedEx is doing Network 2.0, which is them shutting down their smaller buildings, trying to consolidate them into bigger buildings, trying to do this whole automation thing. And it's caused a lot of this rift. And, another thing with UPS, though, is they've let go of the Amazon volume and let go of they just now started moving some of the smaller volume back. We call it SurePost. They moved it back to the post office. So UPS really wants the high dollar packages more than anything.
Another thing that I noticed about peak season this year is I saw a lot of news, and I'm interested in how much of this kind of trickled down to the actual day-to-day operations, but I saw a lot of news and a lot of headlines about layoffs and building closures during October, November, December. And that seems like a strange time to cut staff, to cut physical infrastructure. It seems like, that you would do that in February or March or April. Why have they been making all of these cost-cutting moves over the last few months? And also, to what extent is that actually happening to union members versus management?
Most of the time when the company comes out with these layoffs, it's at management for the most part. Not to say that we don't have layoffs on the union member side either, because it's done differently. We have a contract. Everything is seniority based. So now to back up for a minute, you were talking about the building closures during October, November, December. A lot of the times the company will announce building closures, but then they don't actually push forward to do it until January, February, when the volume actually starts dropping off. But they will, like right now, they're actively pushing for this whole, I guess they call it networking in the future, to try to consolidate buildings. And it seems like that's their main goal right now, more than anything else.
Many people try to, whenever they see these layoffs, they literally don't look past the headline. I've got a regular appearance on one of the morning conservative talk radio hosts program, and so every time one of these literally, he apparently just reads the headlines, and he says, and he basically either implicitly or explicitly tries to blame the layoffs on the 2023 contract that the Teamsters were able to negotiate with UPS. What do you make of arguments like that?
I think it's absolutely foolish. For one, FedEx is doing the exact same thing. They have their thing called Network 2.0, which they're doing building closures, layoffs. They're trying to consolidate all their W-2 employees to be subcontractors now. And right now, they're going through even more chaos than we are over on UPS's side. I do think that, and I really haven't pushed this out there on my channel yet. It's kind of in the middle of being processed right now, but UPS is actively trying to get their sales team going again. And they're trying to rebuild it from the ground up and be even better. And I think this is a really good opportunity for them, because FedEx, from what I've seen, they seem to be dropping the ball a lot when it comes to service. And I think the UPS can get those accounts right now. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I don't think a lot of members know that yet. But I'll dig into that more later down the road once I get the green light from certain people that I can discuss it on my channel.
And folks can check out your channel at the Roswell Hub. You should definitely do that for sure if you work at UPS. If you work at UPS and you're not already following the Roswell Hub, you definitely need to do that. You can find that on YouTube. And so, you said when you hear people kind of trying to blame UPS layoffs on the union, your first response is that, well, these are kind of industry-wide trends, right? FedEx is doing similar things, and they don't have a union they can blame. They pay their people literally half of what UPS drivers make, and they're still doing similar sorts of things. And another thing that always amazes me is that almost always, kind of like you said, these layoffs are of management employees. So it definitionally can't be the union contract being responsible for management being laid off, right?
100%. And, I think this, Jacob, is a lot of these layoffs being announced and everything is for the shareholders to read, and they're trying to boost their stock up. A lot of corporations are doing it nowadays. UPS seems to be pretty aggressive with it. When it comes to us, there are things that can happen. We've had 93 buildings shut down this year across the U.S. And what ends up happening is when one of those buildings shut down, well, the feeder route that used to go there can't go there anymore. And then that guy's job, and it depends on what supplement you're under, but you get laid off, you can be pushed back in the building. And then eventually what ends up happening is maybe a part-timer gets laid off, or a lot of the part-time work ends up it's a high turnover job, so maybe they just won't rehire the next guy that's in line. But for like management, they can just give them a layoff letter and you're out the door, and UPS has a lot of employees, so they may announce that they did 50,000 layoffs, but with over close to 500,000 employees in total, it's not as huge as it sounds as the headlines,
Right. Right. And speaking of comparisons to FedEx, we have somebody in the Twitch chat. K Martra Radio DJ said FedEx is the worst delivery service in my area anyways. I could go on and on with FedEx complaints, not UPS though, as an end user. I think that's interesting. And so how has the union been responding to all of these headlines and press releases about layoffs, building closures, automation? What has the international been doing, and then joint councils and down to the local unions?
I mean, we just have to enforce our contract at the end of the day. I mean, everybody has like different supplements, and I think a lot of the unions or a lot of the locals have been pretty adamant in educating the members to let them know what their rights are, as far as this is your seniority. This is what it is. Unfortunately, as a union, we can't tell the company how to run their company. They can run it whichever way they want to, but we can tell the members to have their seniority honored by the contract and to make sure that the layoff language is done correctly. And I think that's I don't know what else to say about it outside of that.
Yes, it's true that the union can't tell the company how to run the company right now under the contract, and basically no union has, the capability in their contract to do that. But just for the listeners, you should look into the Treaty of Detroit, where the UAW, because prior to that, and I think the Treaty of Detroit was 1953. The UAW was actually moving into trying to pull some management functions into the union and trying to give the union actual control over, some management decisions, some of the directions of the company. And trying to do things like keep the costs of vehicles down, getting a commitment from management to say that we're not going to raise the price of vehicles to pay for the increases in wages and benefits for UAW members, and stuff like that. There was an interest at one point from the labor movement in being actually being a proper partner with management in the running of these companies and having labor have a seat at the table in boardrooms and things like that. And since the Treaty of Detroit, unions have really moved away from that, and there's basically none of them that are even trying to do that now. And there's some, myself among them, that think that it's worth exploring those ideas, and we'll leave it at that for now. But as difficult as peak season is, what comes after it, I have learned, can be just as difficult in a lot of different ways. Teamsters, I have learned, call this the season after peak season, hunting season. Can you tell me why it has that name and what it's like working for the company in, January, February, March?
So, yeah, as you said, peak season, we're getting slammed with volume. And as soon as the volume drops, now they have this plethora of employees. They may start doing layoffs or, go down the road. But then, the idle hands for them, right? So it just seems like that the company tries to nitpick and find anything that you do wrong and then stack discipline on you, and, terminations start going up. And you really got to be on your A game. You really got to know what your rights are as far as the cardinal infractions, as we call them in our contract, So like for us, we have 7 cardinal infractions where dishonesty, rollaway accident, unreported accident, serious accident, drug and alcohol, no unauthorized passengers, and then physical violence. Like if you do any of those 7 things, You could be walked out the door. And a lot of the times, and most of the supplements out there, all but one that I know of, has dishonesty in there. And the company can hang their hat on dishonesty as being anything, really. So you could say, you scanned this package out of area. Well, now you're falsifying records. I'm going to fire you for dishonesty. Or you signed for a package. So, we have those Ring doorbells. You go up and you may have a box of wine. You ring the doorbell, and the person over the Ring doorbell says, "Oh, that's fine. Just sign it and leave it there." A lot of drivers that don't know better will do that, not realizing if that package ends up missing or in the wrong hands, that customer calls the 1-800 number, and now they do an investigation on you, and they find out that you've been doing this the whole time, or you signed for the package. Now they got you on dishonesty. So it's as crazy as it sounds. Like, even the things that you may think in your head are small things can cost you your job, and it makes it really hard for us to defend your case when we go to panel.
Right. There is the Teamsters for a Democratic Union, along with UPS Teamsters United, are doing a webinar on how to survive hunting season. If you Google TDU preparing for hunting season at UPS, you can find it. They said that they're going to be covering the most important UPS methods, the basics of just cause and progressive discipline, layoffs, what you need to know, and how to fight them with contract enforcement, and what to do if you are called into the office. If I was a UPS Teamster, I would probably be attending this webinar, and so I would recommend folks check that out. And
yeah,
so
I'm actually a TDU member, and they do cover really good information.
Are you going to be at that webinar? Are you going to be giving the webinar?
No, it'll probably be Kerwood, the other guy that runs the show with me. So
I gotcha. Well, and so it sounds like your best advice. It sounds like the primary point of advice is don't put yourself in a situation where they can write you up on particularly one of these 7 cardinal infractions, but really on anything, over these next couple of months, really try to be on your best behavior. But let's say that something happens and I've slipped up and I've made a mistake. What can I do at that point?
If you violate one of the cardinal infractions, and just 100% keep in mind that if you're watching this and you're a UPS employee, all the supplements can be different. So talk to your business agent, talk to your steward of what your what your cardinal infractions are. But let's say you slip up. Let's say you do sign for someone's package and you do get caught. And at that point, unfortunately, you're kind of working on the back end. You're better off just being open and honest and saying, "Hey, I screwed up. This is what I did." The company's very good at, documenting everything. They have everything on, record pretty much of what you've done, or they'll investigate it. And I've been, unfortunately, in the office before where people go in there and they may have been caught in one of these things, but then they go in the office and they try to lie their way out of it. And all you're doing is you're digging a bigger hole for yourself. And so that's one of my key advice. But the number one thing to do is always talk to your business agent and get their advice on how to handle a situation, and always be honest with your business agent. Don't go and feed them a story that is filled with a bunch of half-truths, because now he's working on the
yes.
He's working. Yeah, you're putting him in a bad situation. So
right. Yeah, like if you're being accused of a crime, you don't want to lie to your defense attorney, right? Your defense attorney needs to have the full story so that they can properly defend you. And so your business agent, your steward, when they're going into the boss's office to try to defend you, they need to know the full story so that they can best represent you, for sure. So definitely don't lie to your business agent or your steward.
100%. I'm sorry, there was one more thing I wanted to add real quick. The other side of this is not just being discharged, is the progressive discipline. So there will be situations where the company will follow you around and they may say you didn't use this method correctly or whatever, and then they give you a warning letter, and then they kind of like stack up to suspension, intent to term over time, over three different or oh great, my camera died on me. Sorry guys.
No worries.
But my mic still works. But you know,
Yes.
at the end of the day, and then we have the bars. Anyways, at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is that when you're going through that progressive discipline, a lot of people get angry, and I get it because it's like you feel like your livelihood's been under attack or whatever. I can't tell you, I have many, 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 many write-ups myself and my center, and if I go down to the union hall and they show me the drawer of write-ups, I mean, there's plenty of write-ups out there. So it's just like, don't feel like you're alone or you're being particularly targeted. You may be, but for the most part, this is happening everywhere right now.
You mentioned that about progressive discipline and getting write-ups, and the webinar, what they talked about that they would be going over is just cause, and that's something that that most people in non-union workplaces don't have a right to. Maybe they have an expectation of it because, on some level that seems just the good thing to do to somebody who is literally sacrificing the majority of their waking life to the company. Progressive discipline and just cause is like a normal good person thing to do. But most people don't have, the company can just decide to not do progressive discipline for most people. Why do you think that just cause and having that backed up by a contract is such an important thing and is, in my opinion, I don't know if it's yours, but in my opinion is really one of the least appreciated benefits of being union?
I don't think a lot of people know what just cause is or arbitration or that whole aspect of it. Us being involved in this as deep as we are, we kind of see things through a different lens. I mean, just cause basically protects you from the foolishness behavior that these corporations have. They can't just make up the rules. The rules are already kind of established. They're common sense rules for the most part. And, it gives us an extra layer of protection in case you do go to arbitration.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that it really is a bummer that so many people in this country work under at-will conditions where your boss can come in the morning and just be upset, woke up on the wrong side of the bed, and they can literally fire you for any reason or no reason at all, as long as it's not illegal. And that's a big reason you should have a union, even if you don't get anything else in your union contract. If you get just cause protection and progressive discipline, it will have been worth it. I've got a question for you from the chat. Journey to Insight on YouTube asks, if you have any advice to give to people in the Tennessee Valley from your knowledge of the Teamsters battles against UPS's corporate practices that could be of any assistance to us as we fight potential attempts to privatize the TVA. You may not, I'm not sure, I don't think you're in the TVA service area, so you're probably not familiar, but the TVA is the utility company that generates and gives power to people in Tennessee and North Alabama and in some portions of several other states, including Georgia. It's owned by the federal government. Energy is significantly cheaper. Like the TVA produces literally some of the cheapest and most reliable energy in the country, and there has been some interest from the Trump administration and Republicans in privatizing it. And so there's real concern about the TVA being run for profit by, these corporate types that have started running UPS over the last, several years. I can't remember when it went public. But do you have anything that you think is like transferable to fighting against privatization of the TVA?
Ooh, I mean, all I can say is organize. I would probably not be the best person to ask that. I'm sorry.
No worries. No, I thought I'd ask it to you. I thought it was a good question, and I would agree. I think the answer is organize. What's the question? And particularly in your community, and I think the organizing against privatization of the TVA is something that can have a uniquely broad set of constituents that oppose it, because you think about everybody. Literally, there is nobody in the TVA service area that would benefit from privatization of the TVA. You think about Toyota, you think about Volkswagen, you think about Ford in Memphis. All of these companies, none of these companies, the businesses, the people that would typically be on the other end of fights with unions, it's not going to benefit them if their utility bill increases 30 to 40% either, right? So David, I really appreciate your time. Is there anything that you would want to leave our listeners with before we let you go?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a UPS employee and you're watching this or you're listening to this, just listen. Go to a meeting, get involved, know your contract. There's plenty of resources out there. That's why I started the Roswell Hub channel, is just as an extra resource. But just, this is your livelihood at stake, and you should take it serious. Like, don't be one of those guys that just comes in and busts ass and goes home and then finds out they've been doing something they shouldn't have been doing for X number of years. And it's a terrible way to lose a career. And it's just, you got to take it serious.
Yep. David Allen, a member of the Teamsters Local 728, not speaking on behalf of his local union, and also a host of the Roswell Hub on YouTube, a channel dedicated to giving actionable information to UPS Teamsters. David, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, man.
We're going to take a break, folks. We will be right back. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855 617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We just wrapped up our conversation with David Allen, a UPS Teamster, about how to survive hunting season. If you missed it, you can watch the stream or wait for the video to drop on its own. Next week, we've got a great second half of the program lined up for you. We're going to be talking to the president of the Minnesota AFL CIO about the Minneapolis protests and how labor is responding. Really excited for that conversation. We'll be opening the phones at 11 a.m. as soon as we get off the radio, so find us on YouTube and Facebook or Twitch or TikTok. We're all over the place live right now. And give us a call at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Would love to hear from you. We don't have a whole lot to get to with Boss Watch, so I wanted to bring you this clip from Mehmet Oz. He is at I'm not even sure where this was at, but it was at some sort of roundtable, something or other, about healthcare. And he is bragging about something in Alabama that I think probably ought not be bragged about. Let's just go ahead and play clip 7.
Alabama has no OBGYNs in many of their counties. So they're doing something pretty cool. They're actually having robots do ultrasounds on these pregnant moms. So we can actually get those images back to the big center. So we know if the child has a problem, and we know if that mother's at risk. We have one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world, in the country with the best medicine in the world. It's often stated, people ask, does healthcare stink in America? Well, they don't like it. Would you leave America to get healthcare elsewhere? Nobody leaves. We have the best healthcare if you can get to it. We don't want rural America left behind anymore.
Okay, so this is and hat tip to Vonna McDaniel, friend of the show, president of the Nashville Labor Council. She sent me that this morning. The article on The Hill says that Oz's remarks are based on the CMS's Rural Health Transformation Program, which contains project abstracts for all 50 states. And so he's talking about Alabama's proposed project that funding would go to 11 statewide initiatives, and among them being robotic ultrasound stuff. And it seems like actually a better investment would just be making sure that the rural hospitals that we already have in the state of Alabama, for one, are not closed. For another, maybe that we could reopen some of the rural hospitals that we used to have in the state of Alabama. Something like, is it more than a dozen have closed since 2010, as Alabama has refused to expand Medicaid, which is a huge reason for so many of these rural hospital closures, and a huge reason that we don't have OBGYNs. And I didn't even realize that we do not have OBGYNs in most of Alabama's counties. That sounds bad. It seems like it's less than ideal that in most of the state, there's not an OBGYN that you can go to. And I think that the thing to do that, because even if you can get a robot to do the ultrasound, to physically go and do the ultrasound, you still need a person to evaluate the ultrasound. You still need a person to communicate with the mother and to tell her what's going on and how the baby is doing and things like that. So it's just so crazy. And Bernie Sanders really had a good response to this. He wrote in a post on Twitter, he quote tweeted it. He said, "No, Dr. Oz, it is not cool that we don't have OBGYNs in many rural counties in America. It is an international embarrassment. In the richest country on earth, we need more doctors, nurses, dentists, and mental health counselors, not more robots." And I could not agree more. And the Trump administration is really doing everything that it can to see that doesn't happen. I mean, just thinking about the one big beautiful bill. I mean, give me a second to pull this up because I like to talk about it every time we mention this, about how much money is going to be sucked out of Alabama's economy because of this, just on the healthcare stuff, not to mention anything else that we're talking about. And there are similar numbers for every other state, but Alabama just so happens to have one of the best nonprofit advocacy organizations in the country in Alabama Horizon. So they've got a really good fact sheet that I can go to for these numbers. But in Alabama, in the because the ACA marketplace subsidies were not renewed, nearly 500,000 Alabamians are going to see their marketplace premium increase by nearly 100%. That's nearly double the cost for those people. 130,000 Alabamians are going to lose their health insurance altogether. This loss of health coverage would cost Alabama $1.14 billion in economic activity and 10,000 jobs in 2026. That's just 2020. I mean, that's an annual number, right? That's every year moving forward. We are going to lose $1 billion. For reference, the auto industry in the state of Alabama, which is like Alabama's crown jewel of their economic development, that whole industry is like $10 billion a year in economic activity, right? So you're losing a tenth of the crown jewel of economic development every year because of this bill. And putting $200 million is not going to make up that $1 billion gap, right? And it's not even going to, you're not even going to be able to get robots in all of the counties, right? I mean, we need people, we need nurses, we need doctors, we need OBGYNs, and this kind of stuff is not going to get us there.
Yeah, just a couple facts to throw onto that. According to the University of North Carolina, there have been 9 rural hospitals to close in Alabama since 2009. Only 30% of the state's rural hospitals have labor and delivery units, right? So that's going to leave a lot of expectant parents driving very long distances. It's a very common problem in Alabama, in rural Alabama in particular. And, just worth noting that Alabama is one of 10 states that did not expand Medicaid. Something you didn't mention with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act is that it has made it much more difficult to expand Medicaid. It punishes states for expanding Medicaid, basically.
Wow.
And so for over, 10 years now, this has been a golden opportunity, out here for Alabama that could have created jobs, that could have covered more people, that could have fueled our economy. And it was just not acted on for all these years, right? We could have saved lives, literally saved people's lives.
Right.
And, a lot of leaders in Montgomery resisted it. And here we are now with even more of our neighbors losing their health care.
We do have a couple of Boss Watch stories, so let's go ahead and get to those. Over in Florida, Hare Krishna Lakeland, LLC, which operates as Motel 6 in Lakeland, Florida, resolved a charge of discrimination with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. According to the charge that was filed with the agency, the Lakeland Motel 6 discriminated against an employee on the basis of disability, ultimately forcing her to quit her job in approximately July of 2023. EEOC Miami District Director Evangeline Hawthorne said the hotel industry often faces persistent labor shortages. Individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities can effectively fill needed jobs with or without reasonable accommodations. The alleged conduct of the Motel 6 violates the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, which prohibits employers from discriminating on the basis of disability and requires employers to provide reasonable accommodations unless doing so would present an undue hardship. As part of the 3-year conciliation agreement resolving the charge, Motel 6 agreed to pay the employee $50,000 in back pay and compensatory damages. The company also agreed to implement policies to comply with the ADA, including specific provisions requiring the company to respond for requests for reasonable accommodation in a timely manner. In addition, the employer will provide annual ADA training to all management and non-management staff and report to the EEOC on accommodation requests for 3 years. Further, Motel 6 will post a notice about equal employment opportunity rights, which encourages employees to report allegations of discrimination. Over in D.C., registered nurses at MedStar Washington Hospital Center in Washington, D.C. will hold a protest on Thursday, January 15th. Registered nurses at MedStar Washington Hospital Center in Washington, D.C. held a protest on Thursday, January 15th, to announce that they have formally filed a complaint with the D.C. Office of the Attorney General regarding systemic wage and hour violations, announced the National Nurses United, NNU. In the complaint, the nurses allege that management falsified pay records, paid nurses the incorrect amount, failed to pay nurses on the correct date, and has let missed paychecks go unpaid for weeks. Additionally, the complaint outlines how management has created a hospital-wide culture that encourages and pressures staff to perform work off the clock. One registered nurse in the operating room, Linda Springs, said, "A week before Christmas, on payday, I did not receive a paycheck at all. It shouldn't be our job to have to demand that we get paid correctly. We should be paid correctly because it is the hospital's legal obligation to pay us correctly. We give our lives to this hospital, to our patients, and we should be compensated appropriately." Another registered nurse, this one in the emergency department, Ashley Marshall, said, "Discovering that management has been altering our time cards to reflect breaks we never took has completely undermined my trust in this hospital. Wages were deducted from my paycheck without my knowledge, and I'm now forced to review every pay stub to ensure nothing else has been altered." Despite its recent magnet designation, MedStar prioritizes financial considerations over its nurses, the very ones who are providing care to our community. National Nurses United represents more than 2,200 nurses at MedStar Washington Hospital Center. That is it for Boss Watch, and that is it for the first half of our program. Like I said, we've got a great second half of the program. Lots of stuff to talk about, including how a UAW member told off President Donald Trump to his face. Really excited to play that clip for you. It's going to be great. We've also got a clip from Mr. Beast where we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit about economic inequality and wealth inequality. We're going to go a little bit deeper into the NIOSH win. We've got some clips from Martin Luther King about the struggle for economic justice, and we're going to be talking to the president of the Minnesota AFL-CIO about the protests in Minneapolis and labor's response. Adam, we've got about a minute and a half. Do we have any plugs for people before we get off the radio?
Oh, I just want to remind folks to go to labornodes.org/events and find out what is going on in terms of trainings and other opportunities to learn a little bit, grow, meet some good people. Just for your record, for your knowledge, January 22nd is the Stewards Workshop, and it's holding effective meetings. They also have an online workshop January 28th, language equity in your local union. And of course, the big Labor Notes Conference in 2026 will be June 12th in Chicago. So go ahead and save the date for that. Looking forward to it. And also want to remind folks that we are on Means TV, and we're glad to be a partner with Means TV. You can use the discount code TVLR and get 20% off, right? So either whether you want to do it monthly or do an annual payment, it's up to you. But you can get 20% off that payment using the code TVLR. Means TV is a worker-owned streaming cooperative. So it's like similar to Netflix or Hulu, except it's actually worker-owned and really cool content by and for working-class people. So check out Means TV. Big fan.
Yep. All right, we're going to be heading into the second half of the program. Find us on Facebook and YouTube at The Valley Labor Report to continue watching. If you don't find us, though, we appreciate your time, and we'll see you next week. TVLR.fm/donate if you'd like to help us stay on the air, and TVLR.fm/store if you would like to buy our merch. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week. All right, folks, we are off the radio now. Thank you for staying tuned. We're going to go ahead and open the phones. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857. And we will take your calls at the beginning of the second half of the program. TVLR.fm/contact if you'd like to leave us a written note, though. So we're going to take a break, and we will be right back with Overtime.
In the host room
Come on, you poor workers, good
of
news
interface.
to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party H player. Which
This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Or, if you are one of the lucky few who are tuning in live, you can give us a call right now, and we will answer the phone and get you on the air. You can also send us a note at tvlr.fm/contact. We do have a bunch of good stuff to get to, though. Let's talk about this UAW guy. This is so funny. So let's just play the clip. I'm not going to give you any more exposition on it. There's this great UAW worker who has some words for the president as he is touring a Ford factory. Let's play clip 1. Okay, so it may be difficult if you don't know what he says to pick up actually what is being said. But what's being said there is pedophile protector. He's looking at the president, calling him a pedophile protector. In comments after the incident, the employee had really, I mean, it was just fantastic stuff. TJ Sabula is his name. He is a 40-year-old United Auto Workers Local 600 member, a line worker at the factory. He told the Washington Post that he was the one who shouted at Trump, and he said he has been suspended from work pending an investigation. Quote, as far as calling him out, definitely no regrets whatsoever, though he added he is concerned about the future of his job and believes that he has been targeted for political retribution for embarrassing Trump in front of his friends. He estimated that he was roughly 60 feet away from Trump on Tuesday when he did this and that the president could hear him very, very clearly. He said he was specifically referencing Trump's handling of the Epstein matter. Interestingly, the Post said that the worker identifies as politically independent and said he has never voted for Trump but has supported other Republicans. And this is a fantastic quote. He said, quote, I don't feel as though fate looks upon you often, and when it does, you better be ready to seize the opportunity. And today, I think I did that.
Amen, brother.
Yeah. An online fundraiser was started that evening that sought to raise money for him after his suspension, and it has collected as of literally just the next day. So I don't know what it is today, but as of the next day, it was $150,000. I mean, so cool. There was a statement on the Ford plant visit from Laura Dickerson, the vice president of the Ford department for the International Union. Here's her quote. The auto worker at the Dearborn truck plant is a proud member of a strong and fighting union, the UAW. He believes in freedom of speech, a principle we wholeheartedly embrace, and we stand with our membership in protecting their voice on the job. The UAW will ensure that our members receive the full protection of all negotiated contract language, safeguarding his job and his rights as a union member. And the last line, I loved it. This was a fantastic line, I thought. Workers should never be subjected to vulgar language or behavior by anyone, including the President of the United States. And you may not have picked up on this, particularly if you're listening audio only, but the President, after he was called pedophile protector, which I would note is not obscene. There's no cursing in there or vulgar language. It's just a statement of this man's opinion about his behavior. The president shot him the bird and said F you very clearly and like, you know, and so it's, I think it's very funny that the UAW is saying that the president of the United States shouldn't use such mean language to our members who called him a pedophile protector. I think that's great. That's based. That's awesome. So thank you for your service, TJ Sabula, thank you for your service. Vice President Laura Dickerson of the United Auto Workers. Just super great, and hopefully he is able to retain his job. And I also just want to say, we were talking earlier in the program with a Teamster about the importance of just cause and progressive discipline. And frankly, we didn't talk about this, but frankly also free speech. And
right.
I do think absolutely that if your boss is trying to basically parade you around as like, oh, look at my nice little worker bees, aren't they so good and docile and good at their job, to the president of the United States in particular, and you don't like that president, they could have if they knew your politics, they could have scheduled you not to work that day, right? And so I don't know about the advanced nature of the visit. I don't know if people knew that he was going to be there or what the deal was with that. But I think good for this guy, and he should get to keep his job, and everybody should be able to heckle a president. I think that we frankly have too much respect for, at least before Trump. I think Trump has, because of his own lack of decorum, he's kind of degraded the respect for the office of the president. But I've always thought that, just generally speaking, there's too much about this. Respect the office, respect the president. Where no. Instead, I think that presidents and politicians generally being heckled is should be part of the job, and you gotta be willing to accept that as part of the job. So I think it's very funny. And Mark in the chat says, you think lost it. You think this is funny? He's an idiot, and so are you. I mean, I don't care. This is America, baby. This is America, and even if you think he's an idiot, he should have a right to be an idiot and heckle the president of the United States.
And the fact that he has a union is why he is at least just facing investigation right now, not already walked out the door. What if this has happened at Hyundai or somewhere like that? Where,
they'd be gone immediately.
Where he didn't have union protections, right? So that's just a really big difference when it comes to freedom of speech.
Somebody in the chat says the GoFundMe is now over $300,000 for this guy. Man, that's awesome. That's so cool. And why shouldn't you be able to heckle the president of the United States? Like, especially now, the president is so cloistered, and rightfully so. He needs to be safe, and we want to make sure that we don't have political violence or anything like that. And so, it's understandable in a country this large and as polarized as we are that the president would be so cloistered. But nevertheless, it is a fact that he is cloistered, and he is not often faced in person with the reaction of the public. And so any opportunity that the public has to non-violently register their disapproval with the president of the United States, I think that's all good and well.
Yeah. I mean, at least he didn't throw a shoe at him.
True.
That happened to W back in the day. Yeah. That guy got a statue.
He did get a statue, and he is on Twitter now. And so, every time, he must just, search shoe guy or guy who threw his shoe at George Bush, because literally every time somebody posts the video on Twitter, he will quote tweet it and say, thank you.
I love that. That's just a good
it's
ending
a good
to
bit.
that story. Yeah.
Yes, it's a good bit. Steve in the chat says the GoFundMe was almost at $800,000 before they shut it down, and they released to donate to other GoFundMes to help others who need it. Did GoFundMe shut it down, or did TJ shut it down? I don't know if we know that.
Good question.
Hopefully it was TJ, because also, especially if he was going to keep his job, I would imagine. Yeah. Okay. Steve says TJ. TJ shut it down, and released it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Especially if you're going to keep your job, then it'd be a little weird to be like, I'm just going to keep $1 million from this. So that's the union spirit right there.
Absolutely.
Give your,
How cool will that be if that's how it works out? What if this brother keeps his job and raised a bunch of money that he can put towards good causes? in the spirit of solidarity, all because he called the president a pedophile protector, and the president didn't like it.
Based! That'd be great.
Don't protect pedophiles, and
True.
people won't say that. I mean, that's just one idea.
Yeah.
Some people would say that.
Right.
Many people would say that.
We got another video that I wanted to play here, and this is of Mr. Beast. And no, I don't think Adam knows very much about Mr. Beast, which is actually surprising. I think that your daughter is like in the age range that she would be watching Mr. Beast videos.
She's not a fan.
She's not a fan of Mr. Beast. She knows Mr. Beast?
She's aware of him, yeah, not a fan.
Not a fan. What is she giving you any
Not really. We have just agreed that he's lame. And so I'm proud of her.
Okay. Well, there you go. So Mr. Beast, really famous YouTuber guy, and like I think the first YouTube billionaire.
Really?
Yeah.
This guy is a billionaire?
Yes. It's a low
B?
single B's, I think. But is a billionaire, actually a billionaire. So he was being interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, and had some comments that I thought were a good jumping off point for some conversations about for lack of a better world, how for lack of better words, how the real world works and how insulated so many people can be from this, even when they come from I don't think that Mr. Beast he didn't come from wealth. Is not my understanding of his background. He came from relatively normal family with respect to their income, and so it is amazing how quickly this level of wealth can seclude you from the realities of the world. Let's play clip 2.
Technically, everyone watching this video has more money than me in their bank account if you subtract the equity value of my company.
We're gonna want to
doesn't buy.
So that's their hook, right? And so I'm trying to learn a little bit more about the TikTok algorithm and how maybe I can implement some of this stuff to make our content on TikTok and the YouTube Shorts a little bit better. But that's their hook, right? So this is from later in the interview. So I'm not gonna give my comments on that absolutely insane comment yet. But that's their hook, and so now they're going to give you the question that generated that hook.
McDonald's in the morning.
You said you keep less than $1 million for yourself despite being a paper billionaire. Why do you choose to operate that way?
It's funny talking about my personal finances because no one ever believes anything I say. So, I mean, because they're like, you're a billionaire. I'm like, that's net worth. I have negative money right now. I'm borrowing money. That's how little money I have.
Okay, so let's pause it right there. So first I want to comment on the idea that like, oh, you only keep $1 million for yourself despite being a paper billionaire. Why do you do that? And like kind of the crux of that question, right, is that, oh, that's so little money. Why do you kind of pauperize yourself by only keeping $1 million,
a mere million,
at your disposal? And the actual reality is that unless you're like a freak, $1 million, keeping $1 million in your checking account, there's basically nothing that you can't do on a day-to-day basis with $1 million for your living expenses, right? And so and that's what that's what it sounds like we're talking about there, that he just has $1 million liquid that he can use at any time. We're not talking about, big investments or whatever, and so like day to day as just a person, there's basically nothing that you can't do that you would want to do if you've got $1 million in your checking account. And so the second thing about that, actually, he's going to continue along this line of thought. So we'll just let the video roll for another second.
Technically, everyone watching this video has more money than me in their bank account if you subtract the equity value of my company, which doesn't buy me McDonald's in the morning or whatever. But yeah, why do I choose to keep it that way?
Okay, pause it right there. So this is and I remember something that I remember Trump saying, or Ivanka saying, that Trump said a similar thing to her. Like they were getting into a limousine and there's a homeless person on the side of the road, and Trump points at him and says, that guy has more money than me right now, because like on paper, Trump was in debt rather than having a positive net worth. But that just totally belies the way that the real world works. And there was actually a paper that was attempting to kind of justify this way of thinking that was released I think it was last week. And Matt Brunig on Twitter was fighting with the author of the paper. And the paper did this. It said, it attempted to say that wealth inequality has not actually increased significantly over the last 40 years when you account for Social Security and Medicare, right? So if you put Social Security and Medicare on the ledger, then wealth inequality has actually been remarkably stable. And Matt Brunig points out, rightfully, that that's not what wealth inequality is measuring, right? You don't have any increased ability. I mean, what wealth inequality measures is your ability to bend the world to your will, right? If you've got a net worth of $2 or $3 million that is relatively liquidly accessible, that you can pull out of an account, your ability to change the world and to do something with that is so much different than if you have the theoretical value of the expected return of Social Security over the course of your life is something like $1 or $2 or $3 million, right? I mean, that's just not measuring the same thing, because yes, you'll get a regular income from Social Security after you retire, and maybe at a certain point, if you're in retirement for 20 years, maybe that equals $1 million or $2 million. But that is not the same as having that money accessible to you, to be able to donate in local elections and buy politicians. And that is why having this the explosion of billionaires is so uniquely problematic. It's not just that money could be used in more socially valuable ways, but it's also that just by the fact of them having that money, of them having the dollar figure attached to their ownership of these huge companies, they are able to bend the world to their will. And, you just have to look at Bill Gates' excursions into education to see how dangerous and poisonous that has been. And he wouldn't have been able to do that if he wasn't a billionaire, right? So it's not just that they have more money and that the money could be used in better ways. It's that the fact of them having the money is poisonous because of what they can do with it. And also, it's just totally a different thing to, theoretically, have a higher net worth than Mr. Beast, or have more money in your bank account than Mr. Beast because Mr. Beast owes money, versus him having this huge net worth and being able to pull some of that out. I mean, he literally in a separate part of the interview talks about how, they ask him what was his biggest splurge, and he talks about how he spent $150,000 on a private jet because he wanted to see his girlfriend in Europe. His girlfriend was in Europe, and so he spent $150,000 on a private jet so that he could see her in 6 hours rather than going through normal flights and seeing her in 19 hours. Like, that kind of thing is just not available to normal people, no matter if if they have more theoretical positive numbers on a bank statement than he does. I mean, it's insane. And look, whatever, right? I mean, you got a couple of $100 million and you want to spend $150,000 on a private jet to go to Europe to see your girlfriend. Like, I'm actually not going to begrudge you of that. That's not, my problem is
not good for the planet.
It's probably not good for the planet, and it's probably not good that you have that much money. But fine, you've got that money and whatever, right? But then the idea that in the same interview you're going to be like, everybody watching this video has more money than me is so it's just so disconnected from reality. It's crazy. Crazy it's so disconnected from reality. Let's continue.
I don't know. I just don't really think of it. I wake up, I just work, and I don't know. I'm just so busy working. I don't really think about my personal bank account, if that makes sense. I'm just laser focused on, making the greatest videos possible and building the business as big as possible.
Okay, so
let me just say that anyone who says they're not thinking about their bank account on a regular basis certainly has plenty of money, because most people are scraping by. The majority of Americans are paycheck to paycheck. The majority, right? So, of course, we're thinking about our checking account because we're making sure we can pay the bills at the end of the month. Just wild.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
So
Steve says in the chat,
I think they should pay more in taxes.
Yeah,
at the very least, that seems like a reasonable thing that maybe, just maybe, they should pay, 1950s level taxes. Like, that seems like a fair compromise. Apparently, America was really great back then, is what I've heard. So
yeah, that's what
we could try that.
Steve in the chat says, one thing Mr. Beast got millions from is the NFL Buccaneers. I didn't realize that. And here's another one. I'm glad you mentioned this, Huntsville Dim Worker in the chat. Rich people live on borrowed money. That's another thing, right? Because normal people like you and me, we live on our labor, right? We make $40, $50, $60, $100,000 a year, and all of that is taxed, basically. But that's what we live on. People like Mr. Beast, by the time that they get to his level of wealth, and I'm not saying that he doesn't work and that he doesn't produce value with his labor. By all accounts, he does. He produces a lot of value with his labor in terms of entertainment. And again, I don't begrudge anybody for being able to keep the value they create. But by the time that you get to his level of wealth, actually the majority of the income that you're generating is not from the labor, the value that your labor creates, but from the interest and the accumulation of your assets.
You got enough money that you can live off the money that your money makes.
Exactly. And that money is not taxed. It's for one, it's not taxed in multiple ways. For one, it's not taxed at the same rate as income when you actually realize capital gains, right? So if you've got a $100,000 investment and then that $100,000 investment turns over the course of 10 years into $200,000, that $100,000 that you make, if you were to generate that $100,000 from labor, it would be taxed at like double or triple the rate than the tax rate that it is when you generate that income from the capital gains. It's like so much less. But then also, if you have a $100,000 investment, it turns into $200,000, but you don't take that investment out, you don't realize the gains, then it's not taxed at all. It's not taxed at all, but you can borrow against the value of the increased investment and not pay taxes on the loan at all, and then you pay the bank back the loan with like a very, very, very low interest rate. And so actually, they're able to live and have significant incomes based on loans and not have to pay taxes basically at all. That's how you get these crazy situations like Warren Buffett talked about, where he, as a billionaire, has a lower tax rate than his secretary, right? And so rich people living on borrowed money is a terrible thing that we have allowed to happen in this country that allows them to completely skirt taxation. Right? And so we gotta fix that somehow. We gotta at least, here's my modest solution. Some people think every dollar over $1 billion should be taxed at 100%, and we should not let people to allow people to accumulate $1 billion. I also happen to agree with that. But as a first step, maybe we don't get enough people to move beyond this first step. But here's a first step that I think we should be able to agree on. Income from capital should be taxed at the same rate as labor. If you make money from your money, you should have to pay as much money on your income as I do because I work for a living. I mean, and people will argue against that, right? But that's not what's happening right now. Right now, people who make money from their money pay significantly less in taxes than people who make money from their work. And that is terrible. That's a terrible state of affairs. So we gotta fix it. We gotta fix it, folks. Steve says, people like Mr. Beast got rich by not paying their employees a living wage, even though he did buy a neighborhood for family and those closest to him. Those who worked on his shows got screwed until the union stepped in. That's another thing. He did try to do his like Netflix show non-union at first, and I think if I'm right, Steve, that the unions were able to organize his stuff. Another chatter, TWY87 says, wasn't Mr. Beast supposed to be some part of some consortium that was attempting to buy TikTok? And I do think that's right. Mark says, I don't think you know what you're talking about. If someone sells stocks and makes $1 million, they pay taxes on that $1 million. Hope you're not doing your own taxes. Yeah, that's literally what I said. If somebody sells stocks and makes $1 million, they're taxed on that $1 million, but they are taxed the capital gains tax rate. I mean, you should do like some reading. The capital gains tax rate, the maximum is like 15%. Whereas if you made that same $1 million from your labor, it would be taxed at like 30%, right? And so I think that people, you should have to pay as much money on income that you derive from capital gains as people who actually work for a living. What's wrong with that? And then another thing is that I don't think that Mark understands how, and it's to be fair to Mark, I mean it's a difficult thing to understand, but also a lot of rich people who have a lot of stocks, they don't actually generate income by selling their stocks. They generate income for them to use like disposably, the way that you and I would use income, by borrowing against the value of those stocks and then paying those back with lower interest rates. So, yeah. Bad. It's a bad state of affairs. The rich have too much money and we got to take it and give it to the people who actually work. It is. Let's see. And then Mark asks, what's wrong with that? It's not for you to decide. I mean, it is for me to decide, actually. I mean, that's what it means to be in a representative republic, right? That's what it means to have a say over the world that you live in. Is that you get to decide the politics and the tax structure. It is actually for me to decide. It's for you to decide. It's for everyone listening to decide. That's the whole thing about living in a polity. Okay. So there was another really, really big win last week. And we're coming up on, we're soon going to be coming up on our guest. And so we don't have time for both of these. So what do you want to get to, Adam? Do you want to get to this NIOSH story, or do we want to play the MLK clips?
I think we should start with MLK, and we can talk about NIOSH after the interview, depending on our time and everything. Okay.
So Martin Luther King Jr. Day is Monday, and Martin Luther King Jr. is I mean, a very, very important person historically, and also has had very, very strong ties to the labor movement. Not very many people know that the last speech that he gave was to striking workers in Memphis, striking sanitation workers who were organized with with AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. Adam, what else? And I've got a couple of clips, not from that speech, but from a different one where he's talking about transitioning the civil rights movement from a movement fighting for political and social rights to a movement fighting for economic rights. And I think it really, really does a good job of connecting these social movements and movements for justice. But before we get to those clips, is there anything that you wanted to say about his legacy?
Well, I think you're correct to point out that it's often under-remembered. Dr. King was absolutely a champion of the labor movement. And, it wasn't just his work around the Memphis sanitation workers strike. It was throughout his career. And we know that he partnered closely with labor. His March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, right? It came out of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters and was funded in part by the United Auto Workers. So this is a really intertwined legacy. And, Dr. King was very outspoken against right to work. And, it's remarkable some of the comments he made that are, that still resonate today. He said in 1962 at the UAW convention that labor has grave problems today of employment, shorter hours, old age security, housing, and retraining against the impact of automation. And, here it is. We're dealing with so many of the same issues. At the end of his life, he was focusing on the Poor People's Campaign. And we're in a situation today where so much of the progress of the 50s, 60s, 70s has been rolled back. We're in a situation today where, many of the benefits that were won and fought for are being dismantled. We're in a bad position right now because the current administration is undermining a lot of laws and policies and regulations we've won over the years to protect against discrimination, to protect equal access to education. The benefits when it comes to SNAP and Medicaid, the massive cuts there that disproportionately affect people of color. But these are issues that we're dealing with and we're still wrestling with today. And so I think it's always appropriate to, look back and learn what we can from leaders like Dr. King and all those who've come before us, because, we're dealing with a lot of the same issues and a lot of the same challenges. Some things are different, but, we're dealing with people and the problems of people and the problems of living in a society and living in a society where some people have a lot and a lot of people don't. And, a situation where a vast majority of people are struggling and we're dealing with a lot of inequality and a lot of inequity. So I think it's wise and appropriate to turn back to that legacy.
There's a piece by the Economic Policy Institute that I think is worth sharing a little bit of. 6 ways the Trump administration tried to erase MLK's legacy in 2025. He gutted the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, which was meant to ensure that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was enforced for federal contractors in particular. He also hindered equal access to education by dismantling the Department of Education and pushing policies that could limit diversity in higher education, a critical pathway to economic mobility. He effectively eliminated the Minority Business Development Agency, the only economic development agency created to help minority-owned businesses overcome social, economic, and legal discrimination. He cut spending on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program amid persistently high rates of poverty for children of color and rising food insecurity. He slashed funding for Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program, programs that disproportionately help families and children of color access health care. And he undermined health equity through massive cuts to the country's public health infrastructure, setting the stage for the next health crisis. So let's play a little bit about from his speech titled "The Other America," about how, interestingly, he saw the next stage in the fight as one that would be much harder than the one that they just came out of. The speech was given in 1967, so this was after the passage of the Civil Rights Act. And so, in his mind, he's moving towards the next stage of the civil rights movement, and he sees it as a lot harder. Let's play clip 5.
The American Negro finds himself living in a triple ghetto: a ghetto of race, a ghetto of poverty, a ghetto is to deal with this problem of the two Americas. We are seeking to make America one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now let me say that the struggle for civil rights, or the struggle to make these two Americas one America, is much more difficult today than it was 5 or 10 years ago. For about a decade or maybe 12 years, we struggled all across the South in glorious struggles to get rid of legal, overt segregation and all of the humiliation that surrounded that system of segregation. In a sense, this was a struggle for decency. We could not go to a lunch counter in so many instances and get a hamburger or a cup of coffee. We could not make use of public accommodations. Public transportation was segregated, and often we had to sit in the back, and within transportation within cities, we often had to stand over empty seats because sections were reserved for whites only. We did not have the right to vote in so many areas of the South. And the struggle was to deal with these problems. Now, certainly they were difficult problems. They were humiliating conditions. And by the thousands, we protested these conditions. We made it clear that it was ultimately more honorable to accept jail cell experiences than to accept segregation and humiliation. By the thousands, students and adults decided to sit in at segregated lunch counters to protest conditions there. And when they were sitting at those lunch counters, they were in reality standing up for the best in the American dream and seeking to take the whole nation back to those great wells of democracy which were dug deep by the founding fathers in the formulation of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Many things were gained as a result of these years of struggle. In 1964, the Civil Rights Bill came into being after the Birmingham movement, which did a great deal to subpoena the conscience of a large segment of the nation to appear before the judgment seat of morality on the whole question of civil rights. After the Selma movement in 1965, we were able to get a voting rights bill. Now, all of these things represented strides, but we must see that the struggle today is much more difficult. It's more difficult today because we are struggling now for genuine equality. And it's much easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee a livable income and a good, solid job. It's much easier to guarantee the right to vote than it is to guarantee the right to live in sanitary, decent housing conditions. It is much easier to integrate a public park than it is to make genuine, quality, integrated education a reality. And so today we are struggling for something which says we demand genuine equality. It's not merely a struggle against extremist behavior toward Negroes. And I'm convinced that many of the very people who supported us in the struggle in the South are not willing to go all the way now. I came to see this in a very difficult and painful way in Chicago over the last year where I've lived and worked. Some of the people who came quickly to march with us in Selma and Birmingham, were active around Chicago. And I came to see that so many people who supported morally and even financially what we were doing in Birmingham and Selma were really outraged against the extremist behavior of Bull Connor and Jim Clark toward Negroes, rather than believing in genuine equality for Negroes. And I think this is what we've got to see now, and this is what makes the struggle much more difficult.
I've got another clip. The next one's about 14 minutes. But one thing that really strikes me as I listen to these older, speeches is how elevated they are compared to political speeches and political debates today. And it really makes me question the idea that, you've got to actually spend a lot of time dumbing down concepts for the American people, because the American people were able to understand Dr. King just fine. And, it's a real... I was reading the transcript and I was like, it's not that I didn't know he was a smart man. He obviously is a smart man, right? But he's like speaking like a smart man and speaking to his audience as if they can understand, when he uses words longer than 3 syllables. And, I think that's something that's interesting. But the content of it is really important, I think, for us to understand as we try to combine social movements and try to fight income and wealth inequality, the importance of recognizing that there are real economic interests against, us divvying up the wealth in a more fair manner that we're not up against in the more kind of social stuff. It is easier for capital to say, fine, you can sit at the lunch counter, but we're still going to own all the restaurants and we're still going to make all the profit from it. So let's go ahead and play clip 6 about, and this is a little bit of a longer one, but he talks about what's next for the civil rights movement. And I think it's something that we should be taking to heart now as we try to build a movement for social and economic justice in the 21st century.
Now let me go on to say that if we are to deal with all of the problems that I've talked about, that we are to bring America to the point that we have one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, there are certain things that we must do. The job ahead must be massive and positive. We must develop massive action programs all over the United States of America in order to deal with the problems that I have mentioned. Now, in order to develop these massive action programs, we've got to get rid of 1 or 2 false notions that continue to exist in our society. One is the notion that only time can solve the problem of racial injustice. I'm sure you've heard this idea. It is the notion almost that is something in the very flow of time that will miraculously cure all evils. And I've heard this over and over again. There are those, and they're often sincere people, who say to Negroes and their allies in the white community that we should slow up and just be nice and patient and continue to pray, and in 100 or 200 years the problem will work itself out, because only time can solve the problem. I think that is an answer to that myth, and it is that time is neutral. It can be used either constructively or destructively. And I'm absolutely convinced that the forces of ill will in our nation, the extreme rightists in our nation, have often used time much more effectively than the forces of goodwill. And it may well be that we will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the vitriolic words of the bad people and the violent actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence and indifference of the good people who sit around and say, wait on time. Somewhere we must come to see that social progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and the persistent work of dedicated individuals, and without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the primitive forces of social stagnation. And so we must help time, and we must realize that the time is always right to do right. Now there's another notion that gets out. It's around everywhere. It's in the South, it's in the North, it's in California and all over our nation. It's the notion that legislation can't solve the problem. It can't do anything in this area. And those who project this argument contend that you've got to change the heart and that you can't change the heart through legislation. Now, I would be the first one to say that there is real need for a lot of heart changing in our country, and I believe in changing the heart. I preach about it. I believe in the need for conversion in many instances and regeneration, to use theological terms. And I would be the first to say that if the race problem in America is to be solved, the white person must treat the Negro right, not merely because the law says it, but because it's natural, because it's right, and because the Negro is his brother. And so I realize that if we are to have a truly integrated society, men and women will have to rise to the majestic heights of being obedient to the unenforceable. But after saying this, let me say another thing which gives the other side, and that is that although it may be true that morality cannot be legislated, behavior can be regulated. Even though it may be true that the law cannot change the heart, it can restrain the heartless. Even though it may be true that the law cannot make a man love me, it can restrain him from lynching me, and I think that's pretty important also. And so while the law may not change the hearts of men, it can and it does change the habits of men. And when you begin to change the habits of men, pretty soon the attitudes will be changed, pretty soon the hearts will be changed. Now, I'm convinced that we still need strong civil rights legislation. And there's a bill before Congress right now to have a national federal open housing bill, a federal law declaring discrimination in housing unconstitutional, and also a bill to make the administration of justice real all over our country. Now, nobody can doubt the need for this. Nobody can doubt the need if he thinks about the fact that since 1963, some 58 Negroes and white civil rights workers have been brutally murdered in the state of Mississippi alone. And not a single person has been convicted for these dastardly crimes. There have been some indictments, but no one has been convicted. And so there is a need for the whole question of the administration of justice. There is a need for fair housing laws all over our country. And it is tragic indeed that Congress last year allowed this bill to die. And that bill died in Congress. A bit of democracy died, a bit of our commitment to justice died. And if it happens again in this session of Congress, greater degree of our commitment to democratic principles will die. And I can see no more dangerous trend in our country than the constant developing of predominantly Negro central cities ringed by white suburbs. This is only inviting social disaster. And the only way this problem will be solved is by the nation taking a strong stand and by state governments taking a strong stand against housing segregation and against discrimination in all of these areas. Now, there's another thing that I'd like to mention as I talk about the Massive Action Program, and time will not permit me to go into specific programmatic action to any great degree. But it must be realized now that the Negro cannot solve the problems by himself. There again, there are those who always say to Negroes, why don't you do something for yourself? Why don't you lift yourselves by your own bootstraps? And we hear this over and over again. Now, certainly, there are many things that we must do for ourselves and that only we can do for ourselves. Certainly, we must develop within a sense of dignity and self-respect that nobody else can give us, a sense of manhood, a sense of personhood, a sense of not being ashamed of our heritage, not being ashamed of our color. It was wrong and tragic that the Negro ever allowed himself to be ashamed of the fact that he was black, or ashamed of the fact that his home, ancestral home, was Africa. And so there's a great deal that the Negro can do to develop self-respect. There's a great deal that the Negro must do and can do to amass political and economic power within his own community and by using his own resources. And so we must do certain things for ourselves, but this must not negate the fact and cause the nation to overlook the fact that the Negro cannot solve the problem himself. A man was on the plane with me some weeks ago, and he came and talked with me, and he said, the problem, Dr. King, that I see with what you all are doing is that every time I see you and other Negroes, you are protesting, and you aren't doing anything for yourselves. And he went on to tell me that he was very poor at one time, and he was able to make it by doing something for himself. Why don't you teach your people, he said, to lift themselves by their own bootstraps? And then he went on to say other groups face disadvantages, the Irish, the Italians, and he went down the line. And I said to him that it does not help the Negro, it only deepens his frustration for unfeeling and sensitive people to say to him that other ethnic groups who migrated or were immigrants to this country just 100 years ago or so have gotten beyond him, and he came here some 344 years ago. And I went on to remind him that the Negro came to this country involuntarily in chains, while others came voluntarily. I went on to remind him that no other racial group has been a slave on American soil. I went on to remind him that the other problem that we have faced over the years is that the society placed a stigma on the color of the Negro, on the color of his skin, because he was black. Doors were closed to him that were not closed to other groups. And I'm to say to people that you ought to lift yourself by your own bootstraps, but it is a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. The fact is that millions of Negroes, as a result of centuries of denial and neglect, have been left bootless, and they find themselves impoverished aliens in this affluent society. And that is a great deal that the society can and must do if the Negro is to gain the economic security that he needs. Now, one of the answers, it seems to me, is a guaranteed annual income, a guaranteed minimum income for all people and for all families of our country. It seems to me seems to me that the civil rights movement must now begin to organize for the guaranteed annual income, begin to organize people all over our country and mobilize forces so that we can bring to the attention of our nation this need and this something which I believe will go a long, long way toward dealing with the Negro's economic problem and the economic problem which many other poor people confront in our nation. Now, I said I wasn't going to talk about Vietnam, but I can't make a speech without mentioning some of the problems that we face there, because I think this war has diverted attention from civil rights. It has strengthened the forces of reaction in our country and has brought to the forefront the military-industrial complex that even President Eisenhower warned us against at one time. And above all, it is destroying human lives. It's destroying the lives of thousands of the young, promising men of our nation, destroying the lives of little boys and little girls in Vietnam. But one of the greatest things that this war is doing to us in civil rights is that it is allowing the great society to be shot down on the battlefields of Vietnam every day. And I submit this afternoon that we can end poverty in the United States. Our nation has the resources to do it. The national gross product of America will rise to the astounding figure of some $7 this year. We have the resources. The question is whether the nation has the will. And I submit that if we can spend $5 billion a year to fight an ill-considered war in Vietnam and $20 billion to put a man on the moon, our nation can spend billions of dollars on their own 2 feet right here on earth.
So many parallels to so many of the topics that he was talking about in that speech. Vietnam, spending money on wars, not on feeding the poor, talking about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps when you are left without boots. It's just... You could spend, you could spend hours and hours talking about all of the parallels. But this is always a good time to reflect on Martin Luther King's legacy and watch some of his speech. Somebody in the chat said, "This is absolutely beautiful. Thank you for sharing." And yeah, I hope you go back and listen. Every time I go back and listen to the speeches, I am reminded again at how powerful a speaker he is, and how, public political life in this country has degraded so much. We do have a guest in the Zoom, though, and I think it's sort of apropos. There's a lot of parallels with this political moment, specifically as it relates to ICE and immigration, to what Martin Luther King was fighting for back then. Bernie Burnham is the president of the Minnesota AFL-CIO. That is the Federation of Unions in the state of Minnesota. President Burnham, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you for having me.
Really, really do appreciate you taking the time. I was talking to your communications director yesterday, and very, very busy is my understanding. Lots of people interested in your comments, and so I appreciate you taking the time to give your thoughts to us. And we want to talk about kind of the elephant in the room in Minnesota and in Minneapolis. But before we do that, whenever I do things like this with union and labor leaders, I find it good to preface it with a conversation about why even do this, right? Because a lot of things, when unions do comment on things outside of our direct wages and working conditions for members that we represent, we get told by people to basically shut up and dribble. That politics is not a place where unions should be involved, and we need to stay in our lane, and this isn't for us. Why are they wrong?
Well, you and I have been hearing this question forever, right? I'm a teacher by trade. Even there, people don't want to talk politics, right? And sadly, or for the good, whether we like to be a part of politics or not, politics are a part of who we are. They drive everyday legislation that impacts the work that we do, and that's across all specters, right? Federal laws like OSHA and minimum and prevailing wage, and state laws like wage theft protections, paid leave, and more. Those aren't things that just were given to us, right? We've been fighting for them for a long time. We continue to fight for pro-labor policies, and I'll say, because oftentimes we get accused of only dealing with one party, we don't care what party politicians are for. What we care about is whether or not they stand up for working people.
Right. That's absolutely right. It just so happens that, there is one party that is almost solely devoted to our destruction, and there's another party that, sometimes they're fine to let us go. Sometimes, they do a little bit of good. Sometimes it's less bad than the other side, is kind of generally how it works. But of course, there are outliers, and I've seen unions endorse Republicans because they've done some good things for unions and the labor movement. And so appreciate you taking just a little bit of a pit stop before we jump into it. The shooting of Renee Nicole Good has really, really depressed me a little bit, specifically with respect to the extent that people are willing to just completely lie. If you look at the video, there's absolutely no way that you can come away from that and honestly believe that she is a domestic terrorist or that she intended to inflict damage on this ICE officer. But even before Good shooting, and we want to talk about the aftermath, there's been a lot of developments, actually, even since we've booked you on the program, is my understanding. But even prior to the shooting, ICE had been in Minneapolis for a while, and people were already agitated and frustrated with their presence. Can you talk about just kind of day to day what that was like to be for working people in Minneapolis in particular, that were having to deal with ICE so much, so many of them present in the city? What was that like on a day to day basis?
Sure. Well, from the moment that they came here, right? People, our members and affiliate members have been talking about the tactics that the ICE agents have been taking. Um, they were going into hospitals and homes and workplaces, even on the grounds of our public schools. We immediately started to hear from our affiliated unions across public and private sectors in the building trades that members have been detained and were being taken out of state. Um, we heard about that on the national level first, but it came to Minnesota pretty quickly. And I'll tell you this, I know a big part of the focus is on Minneapolis and St. Paul and the metro, but it is expanding out into the rest of our state. And so we are hearing from union members across the state about their members being taken. With the help of the national AFL-CIO and international unions in DC, we've been able to make sure that we're fighting for members and getting access to attorneys and other resources while those folks have been put into detention. I hear on a pretty regular basis from leadership that they get some wins where union members are brought back and taken out of detention. But quickly, I also heard yesterday that as soon as one member was brought back, they were arrested again almost immediately by the ICE agents. We've been ready for this. Ever since this administration took office nearly a year ago, we knew it was time to be ready for some federal action. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. And we're a part of a larger coalition of labor unions, community, and faith groups committed to defending our democracy here in Minnesota and across the nation. Staff from our team, and I've got a small, but I shouldn't say we work together closely. We have a really small but a really mighty staff, and they are working hard 24/7 along with our affiliated unions. And we've been training union members. We call them union peacekeepers, both immigrant and U.S. citizens alike, in knowing their rights and how to engage in nonviolent protest all this past year. When you see on the news the people in the orange vests, many of those folks have been trained by ourselves in a coalition to be out there to protect folks. And they're trained in de-escalation and working really hard to keep people as safe as possible.
You mentioned the building trades during that answer, and I have heard from other labor federation leaders. I'm the president of the Labor Council in North Alabama, and so I talked to some other labor council presidents, across the country, and I've heard from others about how agitated the building trades in particular have been about the way that ICE has been behaving. And for anybody that knows anything about the politics of the labor movement, the building trades are always, generally the most conservative elements of the labor movement. And so, I don't know to what extent this dynamic is existing in Minnesota and Minneapolis, but at least in one or two other labor councils, it seems that the building trades are the ones that are leading the anti-ICE efforts and statements and actions. To what extent is that true in Minnesota, and what do you think accounts for their kind of, being in some ways, some of the leaders on what is seen by many as a like a quote unquote progressive issue rather than a conservative issue?
Well, I mean, let's just think about that. They, like anybody else, they need to have workers, right? And oftentimes, in all of our unions and in our building trades for sure, there are immigrants who are working and who are here legally working. And so to have their members be attacked and picked up, we heard a story on Monday. We had a webinar for our affiliates across the state, and one of the business agents from the painters here in Minnesota shared a story of on one of their work sites. I showed up to pick up a specific person, and when they didn't find that person, they just grabbed the next brown person who was on the lot. So they're there to protect their members just like the rest of us. And I think they're finding, we heard stories of roofers who were kept up on roofs, and these are immigrant workers who are union members, were stuck up on a roof for hours at a time and had to go to the hospital after because they were waiting. They wouldn't come down because the ICE agents were present and just hanging out. So, they're grabbing indiscriminately people of color, and it impacts everybody, including the building trades. And so I appreciate their voices. Been on the phone a lot with local leaders, and they are very supportive of the efforts to get ICE out of Minnesota.
So it's been a little over a week now since the shooting of Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis. Can you take us back to that day and what your first thoughts were when you heard the news?
Well, shock, heartache. I'm a teacher and I'm a mom and I'm a community member. And so to hear that a person who had moved to Minnesota because she agreed with the values of our great state, who had been killed, this mom, and was just out trying to protect her neighbors. Um, that was very hard to hear, and it was a day of not many spoken words amongst our staff, but knew that we had to jump into action. We put a statement out about how we, believe in the videos that we see. Like you said, it's clear from the videos that Renee Good was not doing anything to harm anyone. And then you move quickly into anger because these ICE agents are harmful. They are mean-spirited, it appears to me, and they're just here to create chaos and to really rile people up and try to get the president what he's looking for, thinking that, people in Minnesota are just lawless demonstrators, which is not true. Folks here are just working to keep the peace. And again, I'll say just trying to take care of their neighbors and stand up for people. So anger for sure. And knowing that a lot of the media that goes out just shows the bad things that are happening. But I can tell you here on the ground, people are stepping up and Minnesota's resilient, and we will stand together, with our governor and with the people of Minnesota to make sure that we get through this. The hard part about that is, in the meantime, many people are getting harmed and many families are being harmed. So,
you mentioned it a little bit, but I'm curious if you have anything else to add about your reaction to the way that the president and the Department of Homeland Security and Kristi Noem have responded to the shooting.
Well, it's troubling. right? And I mean, that's a mild answer. I'll tell you, I'm pissed about it. Um, I can't believe that these are people who are reportedly leaders of our country who are lying to our face. I mean, everybody has seen the videos. It is very clear that what they're saying is not true, and they're telling us to not believe what we see with our own eyes.
And so, since the shooting and in the weeks since, how has the labor movement responded? You've talked a little bit about how unions have been training people to serve as sort of peacekeepers. I'm wondering to what extent that work has increased, or what additional work has been going on within the labor movement, and how y'all have been coordinating with community and faith allies.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, I mean, there's more than 20,000 people who have been trained as peacekeepers and constitutional observers to be out in the streets, to film what's happening, to work to get ICE off the streets. And again, people are blowing whistles, honking horns, just kind of making sure that we are recording this story so that when the time comes, when this administration's time is over, we'll have everything documented. And just the other day, yesterday, as a matter of fact, there was a congressional delegation here, 28 members of Congress who came and held a hearing in our Senate offices to hear from people who are here, from the mayors of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and from our Attorney General, and also from members of the community who are leaders in all the spaces, unions, like you say, faith leaders and other community groups about what's really happening. And all working together to train people to do the things we need to do to tell the real story of what's happening on the ground. There is an action coming up on Friday the 23rd, where we're asking people, aside from essential workers, to stay away from work if they can, to not buy anything, and to commit themselves to community action. We are taking this up at our executive board on Tuesday, and I'm sure it will pass hands down to show support.
I want to underscore for people listening that may not be, familiar with the way these things usually work. That's very, very unusual. And I've got the call up here. ICE out of Minnesota, Day of Truth and Freedom on January 23rd. This is a group that's calling for no work except emergency services, no school, and no shopping, along with a peaceful march and rally in downtown Minneapolis at 2 p.m. And the Minneapolis Labor Federation has already endorsed it. They said in a statement, the Minnesota labor movement is united against the violent ICE occupation of our beloved cities that has directly impacted union members, our workplaces, and our families. Unions join the demands for the day that call for ICE leaving Minnesota, the agent who killed Renee Good being held legally accountable, no additional federal funding for ICE, and Minnesotan and national companies to become Fourth Amendment businesses, ceasing economic relations with ICE and refusing ICE entry or using their property for staging grounds. It is just, unions in America almost never strike for political reasons, and it's always around specific actions or specific requests for the company to do, and it's always outside of the contract. It's always during contract negotiations once a contract has expired. So I'm wondering, I'm just kind of I was shocked by it, and really amazed at the willingness of the labor movement to take such a step. And I'm wondering if you have any comments about how abnormal it is, and what it means that unions and labor federations in Minnesota are willing to take this step, or anything else about the historical significance of this call.
Sure. Well, I mean, we a year ago in January, we thought the worst action that was going to take place was, and it did take place, where this administration came after our federal employees, who mostly are union workers and veterans for a great part. And now that ICE has continued to push through other unions, and coming after union members, we know and we believe firmly that an injury to one is an injury to all. So it's time for us to stand up and play our role here. Even if they didn't use the tactics that they're using, Detaining people with no criminal record who have been living here and working here for years is not what a nation of immigrants and their descendants should be doing. Uh, Most of the undocumented immigrants in this country are here to work and provide for their families, and they're here for a reason, right? They had to leave their own countries due to lack of safety and just for same. I'm a teacher again. I'll just say many of the founding members of this country left their countries, and
Right.
we are a nation of immigrants, right? And they left for a reason. So um, most folks today and throughout history again, had to leave for political or economic circumstances, and they're finding a way to just take care of themselves and their families. And they are contributing members of this society and of our communities and enrich our lives. The system that we live in is broken, and it makes obtaining work visas a slow and difficult process. Far too many employers are more than willing to hire people and pay them low wages and exploit the work and use that as a way to exploit folks with a constant threat of deportation. Um, we as Americans have a right to be angry. These employers should not be doing the things that they're doing and taking advantage of the system and exploiting people to suppress wages and do wage theft and to suppress worker standards throughout our country. So we need immigration reform that is worker centered. We need a system that has a clear process for people who want to work and live here and a pathway to citizenship for people who built lives right here in the United States. You and I both know that immigrants are not standing in the way of working people
Right.
and a better life. Billionaires are.
As union members from across the country and labor leaders look at the historic actions that Minnesota and Minneapolis unions and labor federations are taking, what would be some of the things that that labor councils and state federations and unions across the country could do to support unions in your state?
Well, I mean, I think it's that firm just standing together, right? And building on solidarity and making sure that people feel safe at their workplace and supporting beyond unions, right? I think we know that when there is union strength in communities, it means that it's better for the rest of the community as well. So we have to go beyond thinking about just our own selves. Unions for a long time have made life better for others in the community as well. So I think it's just being that voice, making sure that we're there to support. And again, um, it's a role that we have to play, and it's our responsibility as American citizens to just stand up and fight back and push back against this fascism that's happening and authoritarianism that's happening in our country.
Taking a step back and looking at the situation more generally, I mean, being being a union member, I mean, in Alabama and somebody who has a public presence, I interface with a lot of, more conservative people, and some folks think that unions ought to be happy with ICE deporting a bunch of people. I mean, not just criminals, but even the ones that you were talking about that are just coming here to live and work and raise a family and be a part of the American community. Unions should even be happy that they're being deported because American citizens and union members could take those jobs theoretically. But the labor movement has, by and large, even aside, again, from the shooting, the labor movement has by and large not been happy with ICE and Trump's deportation regime. I'm wondering how you would respond to somebody who's confused by that state of affairs.
Oh, well, look, I mean, a lot of those jobs are not jobs that everybody wants, right? I mean, these are laborers work hard, and the people that work in the hospitality industry, those are hard jobs. Not everybody wants to do that work, and we know that if many of our immigrants leave our country, it's going to break down our economic system as well. So there just are not enough people to fill the jobs that are often difficult and backbreaking. And yeah, I don't know why anybody would think that ICE was okay here. They are cruel and they are demeaning. They oftentimes uh, they're just not paying attention or asking the right questions. They're not interested
Right.
in hearing what people have to say. They are just here to be bullies. And I think they're doing criminal acts in the way they're performing their jobs.
My final question for you is, a question about the priorities of the administration. I'm not sure if you've been able to see this. Being very busy in Minnesota, but last month, Good Jobs First released an analysis of the federal government's enforcement of labor laws and worker protection laws, and found that the enforcement of those laws has significantly plummeted. Prior to Trump's second term, they found that the enforcement actions and the penalties actually didn't fluctuate all that much. The general fluctuation was around 4%. But during Trump's first 9 months, they found that enforcement dropped significantly. And a couple of those highlights are that wage and hour penalties dropped 83%, wage and hour enforcement cases declined by 97%, workplace health and safety penalties dropped by 47%, and health and safety enforcement cases dropped 35%. What do you think that says about the priorities of this administration when you compare that with the investment in ICE and the rigor with which, or the vigor with which the administration is supporting ICE?
Listen, this just tells us what we've known for a long time, right? Donald Trump and his cronies do not care about working people. The ICE raids are not about protecting workers. This is about seeing how many of their authoritarian tactics they can get away with so they can go ahead and enact their radical right-wing agenda. It's important. It is critical at this time for every American who doesn't like what they're seeing to stand up and raise their voices. And we will continue to do so here in Minnesota and beyond the time that they come to the next state or travel to the next state to create more chaos all over the country. We are here to talk to people and answer questions and talk about how we've built our movement here and share the resources that we have as well. We know we aren't the last ones, sadly. They're going to continue to move across the country, and we're in the fight for the long haul.
Bernie Burnham is president of the Minnesota AFL-CIO, the largest labor federation in the state of Minnesota. President Burnham, thank you for your time. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave the audience with before we let you go?
Yeah, I think I like to reiterate again and again, and I've shared this. I have family that lives out of this country, and what they're seeing, of course, is the news that doesn't look good and terrible things. But I will share that the people of Minnesota are strong. We're resilient. We're standing up. We're taking care of our neighbors and our friends and making sure that people can be as safe as they possibly can. People who are not going to work at the moment because they're afraid to leave their homes. People who aren't sending their children to school because they're afraid to let their children leave their homes. We are here to make sure that people feel, again, as safe as they can. Hopefully with the ruling last night from the court saying that ICE agents should not be using the tactics they're using to harm people. Again, I'm happy with that ruling, but I am curious as I'll get out to see actually how much ICE will listen to it and follow the guidance. But there are good things happening in Minnesota, and people are staying strong.
President Burnham of the Minnesota AFL-CIO, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you, Jacob. I appreciate you.
Yes. All right, folks. That was our conversation with President Bernie Burnham of the Minnesota AFL-CIO. Really appreciated her taking the time. Such an important, such an important position to be in as all of this is unfolding. I do not envy the responsibility that's placed on her shoulders right now, and am really, really impressed with how the labor movement in Minneapolis and Minnesota has been responding here. I think that they're really, really stepping up and doing a good job. So I appreciate them so much for what they're all doing. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857 if you'd like to call in. You have any comments on that interview or anything else that we've talked about today. Do you have any reactions to that interview?
No, I want to reiterate your comment, though. I really appreciate all the folks in Minnesota for standing up and, giving us a little bit of inspiration, I think, across the country.
Yep. All right. Well, then, if that's the case, then we may go ahead and just wrap up. We've got a little bit to talk about with NIOSH, but the workers there will still have one next Saturday, and we might actually be able to get somebody on the program next Saturday to talk to us a little bit more in depth about it. So we'll probably hold that for a second. Anything else that you wanted to get to, Adam, before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so. Just really appreciate all the support and appreciate everyone tuning in today. Don't forget to share and remember, we drop clips throughout the week, so if you miss something, it'll be on the channel. Check it out, share it on social media. We really appreciate that. And also, I think I've mentioned this already this month, but really curious to know who folks want us to have on the show. If there are folks that you think we should interview, please do let us know. Hit us up at tvlr.fm. Even better, if you directly connect us with folks. If you've got someone that you think we should interview, obviously our focus is primarily on the South, but especially in overtime, we are always down to go outside of that and just, any kind of interesting conversation we can have about the power of labor and working people, particularly in the South. So, don't forget about that. Let us know people we should talk to, topics we should explore. Always curious to hear your feedback. So leave us a voicemail this week. We'd love to get some voicemails next Saturday.
That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can leave us a voicemail at any time or send us a written note at tvlr.fm/contact. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. tvlr.fm/donate if you'd like to help us stay on the radio, and tvlr.fm/store to buy our merch. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.